Hello everyone, and welcome to a Taste of SPI, a first webinar in the series for the Summer Peacebuilding Institute 2026. Today we are going to be joined by Joe Cole and DeMointé Wesley to talk about the course that they're going to be offering at this year's Summer Peacebuilding Institute. I thank you all for joining us and participating and watching, whether you're watching this live today or whether you watch at some point in the future. If you are watching us live, I invite you to use the comment section to share where you're watching us from. And throughout the webinar today, as questions may arise, feel free to chat with us using that comment section and we will respond with you. And we will have some interactive time a little later on with Joe and DeMointé. Before we get further in, I'll be happy to share with you guys that this webinar series, which we are calling A Taste of SPI, is a free webinar series designed to give you a preview of the Summer Peacebuilding Institute experience. These short, interactive sessions offer a chance to sample our courses, to meet the instructors, and to engage with the questions and practices and approaches to learning that define the Summer Peacebuilding Institutes. We have, of course, this webinar today on our course Power, Difference, and Restorative Justice in Practice, and we'll have a number of further webinars throughout the month of February and into March as we move forward. So whether you're joining us for the first time or returning to SPI and wondering what class you should take, I'm so glad that you are here. The Summer Peacebuilding Institute is a program of the Center for Justice and Peacebuilding, which is housed here at Eastern Mennonite University on the campus here in Harrisonburg, Virginia, in the beautiful Shenandoah Valley. Every summer, the Summer Peacebuilding Institute brings together over 100 peace builders, practitioners, scholars, dreamers, change makers from around the world to join together in community, in collective learning, to resource and care for one each other so that we can continue doing this meaningful, life-changing work that we do. To give you a bit more of a glimpse about what the Summer Peacebuilding Institute is like, I invite you to watch this video, which will follow here in a moment. This video is about 2 to 3 minutes long and will give you a highlight of what it looks like to be a part of SPI, and you'll hear from some of our 2025 participants as well.
So to me, SPI is a place where people from all around the world can come together who are interested in learning and networking with each other to share stories and skills and to come together and learn about how to build peace in our communities, in ourselves, our families, and in systems of injustice.
It's just powerful. It is really powerful to be in a place where people ultimately share the same goal of a more just and peaceful world. That's a really powerful thing to be a part of.
When you come to SPI, if you're a practitioner, regardless of where you're from and regardless of sort of what your work includes, you feel like you're not alone. Participants will say, this is my place, this is my people, because people understand what I'm talking about. People understand me and I don't have to explain. And so this idea of, we don't share everything, we don't share a language even often, but when we're talking about conflict, we're talking about trying to make change happen in constructive ways and in positive ways.
Why I find SPI valuable is that I get to see multiple perspectives when I come here. I get to see people from other countries that I don't see in my normal life. And I also get to experience the curriculum of very, very different ways of dealing in the world, like the peace building, the conflict analysis, and have conversations that I don't have in my day-to-day life as a faculty member.
There aren't so many places where we get to really connect, reflect, get a little more honest with ourselves, maybe learn more from each other than we can in a typical academic or even a typical public kind of engagement situation.
There's a lot more to SPI than just the courses. First of all, it attracts really fantastic people who are looking to do good in the world and who are looking to build community.
Everybody you meet on the road of EMU, the Eastern Mennonite University, is so friendly. I tell you, this place reminds me of Africa. This place reminds me of my community. Eastern Mennonite University is a place that I have been able to bond with several people.
I experienced a tremendous sense of welcome, not just when I arrived, but throughout my time here. I felt like I was loved before I came here, that the space, that the courses, that the care materials were all prepared for me, for this learning community in a very intentional, loving way.
Don't miss out. You have to come. It is truly a unique place. It is an incubator, it is a networking space, and there's a lot that we learn and grow together here.
Okay, so thank you again for joining us today. Without further ado, I'm going to bring up Joe Cole and DeMointé Wesley, who will introduce themselves and lead us through the rest of our time together, exploring the course Power, Difference, and Restorative Justice in Practice.
Thanks so much, Corey. Welcome, everyone. Like Corey said, my name is DeMointé Wesley, pronouns they, them, theirs. I'll be a co-instructor for this course. I currently serve as the Associate Director of the Zare Institute, which is another program at the Center for Justice and Peacebuilding. And I have concurrent positions with the National Center on Restorative Justice and as a Board of Director member for the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice. So I love community and restorative justice. And so I'm really excited to chat with you all about that and hopefully get to dig into some important and deep RJ topics this summer with you all, if you choose to take the class. Joe, over to you.
Thanks, DeMointé. My name is Joe Cole, and my pronouns are he, him. And I'm really excited about SPI after watching that video. And not just because there's still 2 feet of snow and ice on the ground here in Harrisonburg, but I teach here at CJP. I'm Associate Professor of Restorative Justice, and I'm also an RJ practitioner. I'm connected to a group, an organization called Restorative Justice Durham in North Carolina, and that's where I got trained up as a RJ facilitator and volunteer member of that community-based organization. So yeah, very excited to be working with DeMointé on the class this summer. And yeah, what do you want to talk about, DeMointé?
Yeah, so a little bit of the thinking behind this class. As Joe and I were sort of discussing, what would be a good a topic for folks who are interested in learning about restorative justice or deepening their RJ practice, we sort of started to think about, the role that restorative justice has in this current world, this current landscape, especially as it relates to power and difference. Something that we say in the course description is that although RJ practices seek to equalize power and difference, they do not eliminate them. In fact, RJ has often been accused of protecting institutions and their representatives by obfuscating harmful power dynamics. So something that is often touted as a real strength, a real beautiful thing about restorative justice practices are the fact that RJ practices sort of flatten power, right? If you're familiar with RJ practices such as circle, sitting in circle, it flattens power. Folks have equal voice. Folks have equal time to say what they need to say. But what happens, right, when you are looking to RJ practices to attend to instances of harm where power and difference are still at play, right? In those situations, right, it can actually be even more harmful to sort of obfuscate, cover up, try to blur the differences in power and difference. So how do we actually think about RJ processes in a way that, again, doesn't try to eliminate those differences, but instead really tries to think about them in a thoughtful, constructive way? So that's part of our thinking with this class. We also want to think about, how does power and difference show up internally to the folks doing RJ work? So within RJ organizations, how are practitioners actually attending to how power and difference shows up inside their organization and inside their work? So not just thinking about how power and difference show up in a restorative justice process, but also how it shows up in the actual structure and actual work of an organization. And then another sort of broad umbrella topic is how do we, again, not just think about how power and difference show up in the process, how they're showing up in our organizations, but also how can restorative justice processes be used to actually address
issues of power and difference? What are the RJ practices that really allow us to critique power, to think about difference again, maybe even build lines of connection or across lines of difference, right? Yeah, anything you'd like to add there, Joe?
Yeah, thank you. Just thinking about my experience as a practitioner in restorative justice Durham, and we've gone through a journey internal to the organization around racial awareness and commitment to anti-racism work, and that's been an evolving process. When I started as a facilitator there, we had a facilitator training, but we did not have a component of that training around anti-racism and why that's important. And for us, in Durham, North Carolina, it actually is centrally important. And I would say that's true for anyone practicing anywhere, but especially in the Southern United States. And in the demographics of our organization, it's a volunteer organization where we have a couple of paid coordinators, but most of our practitioners are volunteers. And the majority of our practitioners are white, bodied, female-bodied people over the age of 50. And yet and I would say the majority of our participants in RJ processes, which are being diverted from the criminal legal system in Durham, are Black and brown bodied people. And so, over time, the organization has evolved to center Black and brown leadership within the organization, but also to recognize that we need to do internal work individually, but also as a community organization around anti-racism. So not only have we developed a statement on anti-racism in our training manual, but we have a component of anti-racism training that's now a requirement for all of our facilitators. So that's been an interesting journey. And I would say for me as a practitioner, as given my positionality as a white-bodied, male-bodied, older person, just coming into a room as part of a facilitation team, I am still learning, what that means, right? How does my positionality impact other people in the process? My positionality can sometimes just activate trauma just from me walking into the room, right, before we even start an RJ process. So how can we be aware and sensitive to those, the impacts of our positionality, and how, as DeMointé said, can we work across those lines of difference and actually engage, faithfully and effectively in a restorative process? I have confidence that we can, but that's, part of the question, the core question of the course. Can we, is it effective? Is it possible for us to address issues of difference and power through restorative processes?
Yeah, two things I'll say there that I think are important. Joe and I just spelled out sort of our connection to restorative justice work. So the assumption might be that we are, gung ho, RJ supporters, that we are sort of like blind supporters of RJ. But really, this course is not meant to present RJ as the end all be all answer. It is really to ask those critical questions of like, is this the right practice for certain situations? And so we are inviting folks to come into this class, really critical of restorative justice, and to offer their insights as practitioners, as neophytes, whatever the case may be. I don't want people to get the idea that we are trying to sell anyone on restorative justice just because Joe and I believe in it. I do think it is really important that we are really aware of the critiques and how we as practitioners and people interested in this work really deal with the real implications of those critiques. The other thing that I wanted to mention that I think is really important about this class, this topic, is I know that there are many RJ practitioners, especially like folks working in schools. Some of my background is in K-12 education. And so oftentimes in schools, you know, there is like one person, like one RJ practitioner who is responsible for attending to all of the restorative justice cases. And so thinking about like, you know, am I the right person to facilitate this process? In many cases, you're the only person, right? And so it's about how do you actually develop the competencies to attend to and think critically about the way that difference and power may be impacting the process. So again, I think this class is also for those folks who are in sort of situations like that, where maybe you feel sort of on your own with a limited toolbox to address these very complex situations. How can we build that toolbox out a little bit more?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to add to that, you know, we, as DeMointé is implying, they're indicating this is a practice-based course. We want to be aware of some of the theoretical debates and discussions, but we're really, you know, both of us are very interested in what does this look like in actual RJ processes, right? And so what are some skills that we can develop and awarenesses that we can develop together in our time together this summer. So I'm really excited about that, about diving into some practical activities, some role plays, some scenarios in really trying to, you know, work with the criticisms of RJ from transformative justice, from the decolonizing perspective. You know, what does this mean in actual practice, right? And when our different bodies come together in an RJ process, what does that mean? And how can we work together across these lines of difference and power?
Yeah, thank you, Joe. You know, we won't be before you too long. It is just a taste. But I think what we sort of wanted to do together is maybe think through a scenario, right? And it's okay if you are not like deeply well-versed in RJ. I think the sort of thought is that if you are coming to the class that you have some knowledge of RJ, that could be, you could be very early on in your RJ journey. But we want to think through a scenario. So we'll paint a sort of broad scenario. And again, as we get more specific in the class, the sort of things that we're thinking about, yeah, it gets even more complex and complicated. But let's just think broadly, right? An instance of harm or conflict in a workplace, right? Where you have, say, a supervisor, right? So there is some hierarchy, a supervisor who microaggresses someone who is under them in the sort of org chart. A situation that I have seen is something like, oh, I didn't know that you were from this country. You don't look like you are from this country, or something like that. So that actually might be a little bit more of a macro aggression. But so an instance where, again, there is power implicated in the sort of organizational structure. So a supervisor harming someone who is under them on the org chart. So when we think about that power difference, the organizational power difference, and then also a potential racial power difference, the first sort of question is, do we think that this is even an appropriate case for restorative justice? And what might sort of go into making that consideration? And so again, even if you aren't terribly familiar with restorative justice, one thing you should know is, again, that restorative justice is seeking to attend to instances of harm and conflict by centering the needs of those who are harmed, and also attending to the needs of those who cause harm, hopefully towards the end of healing, reconciliation, getting those needs met. So do we think like a situation like this would be appropriate for restorative justice? Or does power, the power difference, actually preclude it from being suitable? What do we think? And feel free to just drop in comments. There's no right or wrong answers. This is, again, sort of how the class will be. We will be debating. thinking through together? Don't be shy. I might have to call on some of my people in here who I know.
Yeah, so one consideration, and maybe this is a question, the question of acknowledging harm, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of cases of restorative processes, we don't continue a case unless there's a clear acknowledgement of harm. Yes, harm has occurred, and the person responsible for causing the harm acknowledges that, yeah, this harm occurred. And that's the beginning of an accountability process. So if the supervisor in this case initially is saying, oh, I didn't know, or, and there's not really a clear acknowledgement of harm, is it possible to continue in this case?
Yeah. Thanks for that, Joe. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, assume that folks are coming to this ready to be accountable. Jamila says, yes, I think RJ would work in this case. Okay, let's assume, right? Like, this is a workplace where it is sort of written in that we're going to deal through RJ. Oh, actually, I want to read what Aaron says. There will always be power differentials between various humans. I don't think that power difference should automatically ever preclude circumstances from RJ processes. In fact, RJ can support people in better recognizing power dynamics and work to correct them. That's powerful. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so yeah, what do we need to do? What do we need to be thinking about as folks who are attending to instances of harm as practitioners to make sure that the container is right? That the container is correct. What are some things to consider? So again, we have the power differential between the sort of work power differential. Would depend on the broader organizational context. How would the discussion be started? Is there someone outside the work relationship who can support an RJ process? I think those are very important questions. Yeah, who is actually stepping in to be the practitioner? How to make sure or the facilitator, how to make sure that the person who is facilitating has, again, the right position to the conflict, to the people who are involved, right? So does it make sense for a colleague to be facilitating, or should it be someone outside? What about in terms of demographics? Should that person share racial, gender demographics with those who are involved? Who within the org is authorizing or paying for this process? Facilitators, yes. And can they cancel the process if they feel it's not going the way they want? Right. So again, you have the supervisor differential, right? Is the supervisor the one who is paying for the process? Are they the one who is seeking, like, the outside facilitators? Are they the person hiring? How will that feel to the person who is harmed in this process to know that it is the supervisor who is sort of paying for all of this? Yeah, does that feel sort of unequal? And how do we attend to that?
Yeah, those are some great observations and questions, and it invokes some of the RJ values. Ideally, we want the RJ process to be voluntary.
Yeah,
completely voluntary, and yet oftentimes when we're working an RJ process, we're in the real world, we're in a institutional setting, or for example, with RJ Durham, we're getting diversion cases from the criminal legal system, and it's not completely voluntary. If someone is feeling pressure, like, I don't really want to go to court, so I'm going to do this instead, is that completely voluntary? But in our example, in this scenario, might the person harmed feel pressure to participate? And what does their participation mean for confidentiality and for the impact on their work going forward and their relationship with the supervisor going forward, depending on how the process goes?
Yeah. And again, what does pre-work, right, with both participants or all of the participants? Again, who would be all of the participants? Are there sort of other people who should be a part of this process, other colleagues? What is the pre-work that you're doing with everyone? Do you have the time to do that? what time is being allotted to this work by the organization. Other important considerations to think about, and that we would think about together in the course. Part of our work would be to actually think through and create plans of action to attend to particular instances. All right. Okay, so yeah, that's just a little taste of some of the things that we are thinking about. The sort of range of issues and topics that we will be thinking about go from less severe than that to perhaps even more severe or serious, and the sort of time that it would take to create a process would it would take a lot of time, a lot of thinking. And so again, we will do some of that thinking together and struggle through together productively. So I think with that, maybe we can take a little bit of time to ask questions, clear up anything. So feel free, if you have any questions, to drop them in the chat. And we will be happy to attend to them. Hey, Corey.
Thank you, DeMointé and Joe. Just wanted to join the screen here as well in case any questions, general questions about SPI come up. So once again, everyone who's out there and has joined us today, if you have questions about the course specifically, feel free to write them in the comments now. If you have another hot take on how we might perceive or a lens we might look through these situations with, feel free to share them with us. And if you have questions in general about SPI, you're welcome to share them with us as well. For those who are interested in learning more about SPI, you can either scan the QR code that's on the top left of your screen here. And yeah, there we go. And you can also go to www.emu.edu/SPI to learn about all the different courses that we're offering this summer and to register and to sign up. So I see a question here from Isabel that says, what's the best way to start changing an organization's culture towards restorative justice if there is just one staff who values it?
Yeah. Just one staff who values it. I mean, Joe, you can add to this. In my experience, again, mostly working with schools, it is often one staff member who is sort of valuing it, who introduces it to others. And through that process, collects more sort of champions of the work and more knowledgeable, who values it and is more knowledgeable. So I think that the only way to begin is to begin. And that can look like various ways. That can look like if you are the person who is interested in RJ and you have the knowledge, beginning to share it with a small group. Small learning cohorts of folks who are interested, just starting from a place of curiosity. What is this RJ thing? What is there to learn about it? And again, through that way of just starting with a smaller group, not immediately coming through and saying like, we need to change everything about our organization, but just saying like, is this a different way? And then through that slow process of learning together, again, maybe that starts the ball rolling. This is what I have seen, again, especially in schools, that it starts as one or two or three very interested people. They begin learning on their own. They seek out outside resources. They invite those outside resources in, and in that way, things begin to shift and change. Of course, there are different ways to think about and talk about restorative justice that will appeal to different people. I'm always hesitant to start talking about those because, again, I'm not ever trying to sell people on restorative justice, but just sharing like this is restorative justice as I understand it. These are the benefits, and this is how I think it can really impact our culture in a positive way. Joe, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just echoing what you said, DeMointé, being content at the beginning with working small, working slow, and looking for who is naturally drawn or who's excited about RJ or curious about RJ, the early adopters, right? And work with them first. And then another suggestion that I would have is to kind of do like guerrilla RJ, what I call guerrilla RJ, which is looking for opportunities to include restorative practices and work across the organization. So in a meeting, can you do an opening that centers relationship or that encourages practicing reflective listening or developing vocabulary around needs. So those things. So in meetings, in gatherings, cultural events in the organization, you can, spice it up a little bit with some RJ activities. And you don't even have to call them RJ activities, right? But that's what you're doing. You're helping plant some seeds with restorative skills and capacities that can grow in the organization.
Yeah.
I might also add that it would be good to connect with other RJ interested folks wherever you can. At the Zare Institute, we have a monthly huddle of practitioners and monthly webinars where you might be able to ask other folks who have been the only person or one of two people in their orgs what worked for them and how they were able to advocate and persuade. So 2 other questions that have come up here about the course is, one, is this course a beginner's course or more for someone who has some experience or is a practitioner? And then another person would like to know if this course teaches strategies to persuade upper level executives, directors, et cetera, to promote and implement restorative practices, which is both good questions.
Yeah, great questions. I think for the first question, I will say for myself, I'm really hoping that we attract people from a range of experience, from like many years as a practitioner to those who are maybe just getting started. I do think that like the course assumes that you have some understanding of restorative justice. That it won't be a course in which we are giving sort of like, how to keep circle or the sort of basics, so to speak, of restorative justice. So you should have some familiarity with restorative justice before you come into the class, but you need not have been a practitioner for 30 years to be a part of the course.
Yeah, I would definitely say beginners are welcome. And I think we'll experience RJ processes together and activities and role plays, and that will give you an embodied opportunity to learn restorative justice and take that away with you. So you don't have to have a lot of experiential knowledge or theoretical knowledge to participate in the course.
Scholar, not a practitioner. That's fair. Yeah. I mean, but you still may be interested as a scholar in sort of thinking, helping us think through the sort of theoretical considerations that inform the practice. The question about does the course teach strategies to persuade upper level executives, directors? I don't think that we will be doing any direct teaching of how to persuade, but I do think it is something that will come up, right? Again, if RJ is a process that purports to flatten power, that's a hard sell to folks who are implicated in power structures, right? At the top of those power structures. So it will definitely come up of like, again, when we're thinking about creating a restorative justice culture, how do we begin to build such a thing? So maybe not direct strategies, like a list of things or what to do and what to say, but it will definitely be a consideration as we think through some of these scenarios.
Yeah, and for SPI, you have choice about how you want to take the classes for graduate credit, for professional development, how many graduate credits, and we will spend some time talking about designing a potential case study for those who are taking the course for 3 graduate credits. But all of us, everyone in the class will have an opportunity, I think, to strategize and to co-design and talk about materials and resources that can help us implement more restorative practices in the communities and the organizations where we're working and living.
For those who are newer to RJ, there's a really good series called The Little Books, A Little Book of Restorative Justice, and various versions on how to approach restorative justice from different lenses. Could be a great start to cover that introduction before coming to the course.
Yeah.
There's another question here. Does restorative justice always presume a clear perpetrator and victim or survivor? Is it ever employed in situations in which both or multiple parties have a troubled history in which harm is felt by more than one party? I'm thinking about cases of family estrangement and wondering if RJ could be useful or not.
Yeah. I have an answer to this, but I think I've been answering first each time. Joe, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I would say classic RJ does assume, there's a harmed person and a responsible person, and we try to identify who those people are, especially in a criminal legal context. But even in that context, what we have learned over the decades is that it's more complex than that, and we're going to be unpacking the complexities of the relationship and the situation and the histories, and that every person who is responsible for harm is also carrying harm. And so there's this idea called the fluidity of harm, like we've all experienced causing harm and being harmed. And if we're gathering to address a particular incident, there may be some parameters around that about who is in the position of the responsible party and who's in the position of the harmed party initially. But what I see over and over again is that those categories, tend to dissolve somewhat, and part of the process is recognizing the shared humanity, the shared experience of harm, and the shared need, for something better going forward. So we really are trying to, we may start with those roles more clearly defined, but at the end of the process, we're trying to move beyond those roles and create, a different way forward.
Yeah. Not much to add other than to say, I think in sort of like traditional criminal legal system settings, like Joe said, there's the RJ process that, the courts, the prosecutors, they're interested in the sort of outcomes, right? Like, did the person complete the process? Is everyone who was in the process, are they satisfied? And so oftentimes programs I've seen, the only thing that the court gets is the process was completed, we are satisfied. And then that's that, right? And then that satisfies the conditions that the court is sort of interested in. But internal to the process, right, you're thinking about what are the participants actually interested in? And like Joe was saying, oftentimes as more time and work is done, there is perhaps less interest in fault finding, whatever the case may be. So yeah, those, like Joe said, those lines begin to dissolve. And I think a lot of times restorative justice processes do, especially when we're thinking about family or community, again, outside of particular institutions, restorative justice processes don't have to just attend to instances of harm, but also conflict in general, right? And so again, in those instances, something we would think about in class is like when we're thinking about crafting a process, when there is not a clear person who caused harm, person who is the primary recipient of that harm, what do we think, like, what do we do in terms of, who speaks first, who shares, who is actually sharing in the space first? Because that can shift how people are thinking and feeling about the process. So how are we actually really thoughtful about even those specific choices that we're making as a facilitator?
Yeah, and I'd like to add an example. I do a lot of work with intentional communities as a facilitator, and I try to bring restorative processes to that context. And a couple of years ago, I worked with a community where there was an incident of harm around a rainbow flag was on the Common House, and some, in celebration of LGBTQ and support of LGBTQ folks in the community. And some folks in the community were worried that that would make the community a target, for attack, assault. And so some folks took the flag down. And so there was, multiple people that were experiencing harm, multiple people involved in the decision to take the flag down. And then in the aftermath of that, there was harm going in all directions, right? Like how people responded to feeling harmed around the flag and how they treated other people in the community. So there was a lot of relational harm working and moving in multiple directions. And we used a restorative process, based on restorative justice, to unpack that and create a space for everybody to acknowledge, like, what was my contribution to harm in the community, and how do I want to repair that? So everybody had a chance to kind of embody those roles, different roles, multiple roles.
Yeah. Yeah. To just like put a stamp or a button on this, oftentimes what I say is like restorative justice sort of expands the constellation of harm into healing. So again, whereas in a traditional criminal legal system process, you have the victim and the offender. And it is really mostly interested in that and really mostly interested in the so-called offender. But restorative justice sort of baked into it, there is an assumption that there are more people implicated in instances of harm and conflict. And baked into that is, of course, more difficulty, more complexity. So again, that is something that this course, we are really trying to tackle, to chew through. Yeah, it is not just power and difference between these two individuals directly involved, but it's also who else you would have in the process. Yeah.
Thank you, Joe and DeMointé, for engaging all of these wonderful questions. There's clearly a lot of discussion and thinking and debating that is bound to happen in this course. It's a good thing. We'll have 7 days together. Let's see. Power, Difference, and Restorative Justice in Practice is going to run at the Summer Peacebuilding Institute in session 2, which is from May 28th through June 5th. So that means a Thursday and a Friday together, and then a weekend off, and then a full week for the June 1st through 5th. For those of you who are going to be traveling into Harrisonburg, we will fill that weekend with other fun events, which are optional as well. But don't think that you'll just be sitting around in between time. So we really hope that you do join us. Please find more information about these courses on our website, emu.edu/SPI. You can reach out and ask more questions if they're arising by emailing spi@emu.edu. And before we go today, I have one last question for both Joe and DeMointé, and that is if you could share a quick favorite memory of SPI, either having participated as a student taking a class at some point, or teaching, or just engaging with the community. What would be one of your favorite memories, or something else that you're looking forward to this year?
Last year, I had the opportunity to take a course, and it was a course on community healing, gun violence, and restorative justice with the fabulous Dr. T and Dr. Ram Bhagat. And there was a lot of like drumming. You saw some of that in the video. You saw the back of my head as we were drumming in the video. And there was something about that sort of embodied practice as we were like working through very like heavy, a pretty heavy topic, to have that like at the end of each day to sort of like physically process what we were talking about. Yeah, it was just so cool. And I think that there is something about that is very a part of the CJP SPI ethos of not just being so in our brains all of the time, but also thinking and feeling through the body, processing in that way, and doing it in a container that feels very safe. So I think that is, yeah, that is what I would share.
Yeah, and a similar embodied example, the potluck, the weekly potluck. Typically, there's going to be music breaking out and dancing. And, had an experience, maybe this was 2 summers ago, where we had the potluck outdoors and it was warm, but not too warm. And it was lovely. And, folks were sharing music from their cultures from all around the world. And we were dancing as a group, and that kind of embodied spirit of connection and relationship was really joyous.
Thank you so much. Once again, Joe and DeMointé, for sharing this taste of SPI with us today. For anyone who would like to share or rewatch this video, once the stream ends, you'll be emailed a link, and you can also find this on our YouTube page or our SPI website. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to talking with you more or seeing you together at SPI this summer. And thank you all.
Thanks so much. Hope to see you there.